I'm Patrick Oppmann in Havana. This is CNN.